Welcome to another Wednesday webinar. This week, Tricia Kelleher, District Website Facilitator and Online Learning Specialist, and Kayla McAllister, our MPS Assistive Technology Specialist, are going to walk us through what accessibility is, why it's important, and what we can do to help make our documents, emails, and videos accessible to students, staff, and families. As Kayla mentions in the video, this webinar is going to focus on how content is designed and delivered so everyone can access and use it effectively. Enjoy this week's webinar. Again, we hope that you walk away with at least one strategy to apply to your work with students, staff, and families. And as always, reach out to your building ITS with any questions you have.
Everyone, so today we're going to talk about accessibility and what it means, how to do it, things to think about. I'm Trish Kelleher. I am the District Web Facilitator and Online Learning Specialist.
And I'm Kayla McAllister, and I'm the District-wide Assistive Technology Specialist, and I work in the Special Ed Department helping students with disabilities access the curriculum and helping their teachers support them.
So the two of us are doing this because Kayla knows everything about what you're supposed to do. And as the web facilitator, it's always kind of been on my radar because everything I do is online, but now everything you're doing is online too. So get it on your radar. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen because we have a nice presentation to go through some of these, just the nuts and bolts. So we've already told you a little bit about who we are, why you're here.
All right. So what is accessibility? The Office for Civil Rights, OCR, at the U.S. Department of Education defines accessibility as meaning when a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally integrated and equally effective manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. It's a mouthful. On a very basic level, accessibility refers to how materials or spaces are designed to ensure that all people can access and use them effectively. Considering the wide range of diversity, this can be quite challenging for teachers. As teachers, we need to consider the accessibility of curriculum content, teaching materials, and modes of communication. Go to the next.
All right.
Next slide.
I'm getting there.
Okay, so why is accessibility important? All families and students have the right to have equal access to content and communication. When designing instruction, teachers should consider the material or space, the context, and the user. Accessibility is a term that is commonly misunderstood, and to understand whether or not something is accessible, you have to consider all three of these things. It's relevant when you're talking about the curriculum, but also the environment. So some questions we can talk about when we're looking at accessibility, document accessibility is, can the user visually access the content? Can the user hear the content? And is the user able to select the text? So someone with a vision impairment, a hearing impairment, or even a reading disability, those are the people you want to keep in mind when we're talking about accessibility, making sure that everyone can access all of the content that you're sharing. Alrighty.
All right. So like I said, you are all putting everything online. Everything's online now. So now there are things that you didn't have to think about before that you do have to think about. And Kayla talked all about the fancy accessibility rules and why we have to do it. We're going to talk a little bit about exactly what you need to do with everything that you're putting up for your students, for your families, and for our colleagues to make sure that they can access it.
So before we talk about the elements that you need to talk about or consider when you're making content, I just want to kind of touch base about what the grand scheme of what we're talking about is. So someone with a vision impairment might need to use a screen reader. So they rely on that specific assistive technology to access the content that's in front of them. So a screen reader will read everything aloud, including the structure that's embedded in a document or a website. So it's important to structure documents appropriately and using these elements that we're going to talk about to make sure that a person with a vision impairment is able to decipher the important information. Sorry.
So when you say like a screen reader, Kayla, basically you're saying that if I closed my eyes and was trying to access this same information as someone reading it, I would get all of the same content.
You would
I
be
would
able
know
to
exactly what was happening.
Yep.
Okay. So I think that's really important for us as educators and communicators to think about. We have to think about people who, not just people who are looking at our screens, but people who are listening to our screens.
Right. And the screen reader can only read what we give to them. So it will read the structure of the document as well.
Yeah, we like to think computers are smarter than they are. We really have to tell them what to do.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about that, telling them what to do. So when making your materials accessible, we're talking about text materials, Google Docs, Word documents. If you're doing like a Google Sites, if you're fancier and doing other websites, that's also part of the text documents. We're using, and by we, I mean you amazing teachers out there actually working with the students, are using a lot of videos that you've created, videos that you're curating from other third-party places. It's really important that those videos are captioned. And you're on Zoom all day. That's a video, even though we're not recording it. And so it's important to have your Zoom meetings captioned. All right, so back to making your content accessible. On this slide, which we'll share this deck with you, is a link to a document from ISTE that really highlights these important pieces of accessibility structuring and gives you some examples on how to do that. Notice that we have a link down at the bottom of this slide when you're viewing this slide later, and it links out to an ISTE resource that has a lot more details for each of the bulleted structures here that we have. And you can see, because it's blue and underlined, it usually clues you in that it's a hyperlink. But something to just point out, the importance of hyperlinks is to make sure that you have a descriptive title to a hyperlink, because we'll keep referring to screen readers. If you just have the link in there, just the URL, the screen reader will read every single character in that. And that's not helpful to a user, because they don't know what they're going to be linked to. They don't know if they want to go to it. So it's equally as not helpful to have a sentence that says, for more resources, click here. Here is not descriptive. So when you're thinking about links in documents or in emails, think about making sure that your title of your link is descriptive. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, Kayla?
It did.
Okay.
You don't want the whole length of the URL, and you don't want just a short click here, because neither of that provides enough information for a user.
All right, so I'm going to we have a few things here to think about. So your text formatting. This goes back to what Kayla was talking about, how screen readers read structure. And I'm going to open up a Google Doc in a minute and show you a little bit about that. I'm also going to point out in that Google Doc images. Things about images. Like we said, if a screen reader comes to an image, the computer is not smart enough to know what that is an image of. So you need to give it an alternative text so that the screen reader can read and let the user know exactly what image is there. Mm-hmm. One might think, well, who cares? Why do they need to know? And it all goes back to the real reason why we're talking about this, and the real reason why you have to do this. It's important that every single user gets the same accessibility, the same access to the information. Everything you put on a document should be accessible to every user, whether or not they are visually reading it or they're hearing it. And if you have an image that's descriptive and that enhances your document in some way, or that has text on it that's important enough for you to put on a document for your users to read, then your users that are hearing this document should have access to that same information, or else you're eliminating something. You're passing out information to certain users and not all users, which isn't equitable.
Yeah.
So math equations, this is one probably geared more towards secondary, but you're doing a lot of math online, which isn't typical. Your equations are probably very fancy, and you might be taking images of equations, putting them into Google Docs, and having students use Kami or use paper and pencil and solve those documents and take images and upload that image as a submission for you. We're going to make sure that to show you that you need to have those equations written out with an equation editor so that all users can access them. And captioning and transcripts, we just talked about that a little bit, and we'll get into that more later. But I'm going to switch over.
And then we didn't really touch upon the PDF readability yet. But a lot of times teachers might take a screenshot of a document and share it with students as a picture, or they'll upload or like scan a document that they have in paper format and then upload that. But this doesn't provide someone with a vision impairment or a reading disability access to that text. You're just sending them a picture of the text and they can't interact with it in any way. So you want to make sure to share things as a text document or an accessible PDF, and we'll talk more about that in a few seconds.
All right. So I'm going to switch to this really important Google document. Mm-hmm. You'll see that I have an image and that I have a title. Typically, most of us, when we want to make that title stand out so that somebody knows it's a title, we select it. We might make it larger. We might center it, which it's not really centered because it's part of that image. We might make it bold. Doing all of those draws your eye to this text, and you know it's your title. A user reading this document knows it's a title or assumes it's a title because of the way it looks. A screen reader will not read the font size that we just changed. It won't read the boldness that we just changed. To a user using a screen reader and listening to this document, they don't know that that's important. So if you need to make something important, we have all of these built-in tools in our toolbar that help provide those structures that Kayla talked about earlier that screen readers use. So this title needs to become a title. And right now it's just normal text. If you look up in your styles, there's a drop down that allows you to style your text. Kayla taught me something today.
You like the look of how you just made that font for your title. So you like the size 16, you like that it's bolded. You can actually hover over title. You'll get a pop-up and you just want to press update title to match, and then it will change the formatting of title to what you've just colored it there.
So let me show you what she's talking about. So I like the way it looks, but I need to make this accessible. So I will make it a title, and I'm going to use my update title to match. It hasn't changed the look at all. What happens sometimes that gets people a little bit put off is when you don't do that, because I didn't do that before today because Kayla just taught that to me. But if you go up here to style and you just select title, it's now changed the look of that title. I had it font 16, I had it bold. It's made it font 26 and it took away my bold. So you can do, as with anything in technology, you can do it different ways. I can still change this after I've made it a title to be what I wanted it to be, or I can make it easier and do what Kayla said and just update it after I've already made it. So there's two ways you can do it. But I think that the important thing to remember with that is, I think many people shy away from using the formatting up here because they think it takes away their flexibility. And it really doesn't. Even though you've given this the structure of a title, you can still change the look. And it's still a title, but you can make it the look that you want. You're not tied to whatever it gives you when you select title.
And then should we talk quickly about like how there's different headings? So press enter and it's like making a quick table of contents type outline structure. So there's heading 1, there's heading 2. So heading 1 is your main idea. And then heading 2 would be any somewhat important information. But you're mostly going to be using normal text, just to give you some background of what the other structures are.
Some of the other styles to think about here are heading 1 and heading 2. You're going to want to use headings when you want to bring users to a main idea. Again, this is probably in the past, or you've probably made it bold. But kind of if you're outlining your document and you want users to know that this is an important next section of your document, highlight your text and make it a heading. Either you can select heading 1, or if you want to make it exactly how you have it already formatted, you can select it there. And for a screen reader, that just means it will indicate to the listener that that's a next important idea coming up.
So us as sighted users, we tend to skim for looking for the main ideas when we're reading an article or something. This allows a person who's using a screen reader to tab through the information so that they don't have to listen to the information that they don't want to hear.
Which is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't think about it. Another thing from our slide that you might have remembered is we talked about images and how it needs to be important that all users know what the image is. This is our Newton Public Schools logo. If we don't give this image some text for a screen reader to describe it, then it's not available to the user. So for this particular image, that just means the user doesn't have that visual clue that this is a Newton Public Schools created document. And that's important for, users to know what that image represents. So whenever you're adding an image to a document, and when I say document, I hope that you're keeping in mind, we're talking about all text. We're talking about Google Docs, Word documents, and anytime you're creating a website. So to give an image an alternative text, you can see it's popping up for me because I've already done it. You want to control click or right click on the image and go down to alt text. And in Word, it's a little bit different, but you're always going to look for that alt text. And here you can give the image a title and a very good description. So I even put in the green leaves just so that, every user knows exactly what they should be, quote unquote, seeing or what information they should be gathering. Another good thing, we wanted to talk about math equations. I know this isn't for everybody, but in View, there is the option to show the equation toolbar. So here we are. When it's hidden, it doesn't have a check mark, and you'll see it up here. And even for our younger users, this is important. Even for if you wanted to create a new equation and you wanted to do just simple multiplication, division, addition, it's important not to make a multiplication sentence for our younger users using the X key. So you wouldn't want to type in 3x3 equals, because a screen reader would not read that 3 multiplied by 3. It would read it as 3x3. And that's not the same sentence that you want users to see. And then you'll see that they also, for more complex equations, you have all of these options. So it's important to really use the mathematical equations that are built into the programs that we're using to create documents. What else did we want to,
Bullets.
Bullets. How many people don't use the bullets or the numbered lists? When creating a bulleted list, please use the formatting tool for bulleted lists so that a screen reader can read all the content that you're putting. It looks nicer and is accessible to everybody. We hit everything there. Oh, colors. We didn't talk very much about colors. The use of color is important. making sure that you have a good contrast. You notice we have the top of our slides are blue and we have white text, and there's a good contrast between those two colors. And then on the bottom, it's a dark text and a white background. You don't want there to be the colors to be a little too close, even for lots of users that you wouldn't even guess might have trouble with that. A couple of weeks ago, my son, who's an 11th grader at North, brought his computer over. He was doing a Schoology quiz, and the question was comparing two lines in a graph, and one line was blue and one line was green. He knew which line was the answer, but he didn't know which one was blue and which one was green. So he had to ask me, what color is this line? Because he's colorblind and he had no idea. To him, they both looked exactly the same.
And on that note, you could also differentiate the lines by having like a dot and a dash, or having X's, or some kind of other non-color based way of deciphering the letter or the lines.
And if you're set on having the colors, then label the lines as well as line A and line B. Because I know some of us are like set on our visual look of things, and I get that and I respect that. But there also has to be an additional step for those who might not see that.
Yep.
All right, let's moving right along. This is just a visual clues for you to see when you have the ability to make things accessible. So everything you're doing is online right now, but not every program you use is accessible. It doesn't make it easy for you. So we don't expect you to make magic happen. We don't expect you to use a program that's not accessible and make it accessible. We're only asking and hoping that at the end of this, you have a better understanding of what it means to make things accessible and how you can do it in the programs you can do it. And just a couple of things to think about when you're in a text program, whether that's creating a document, creating a website, anything, creating an email, which is probably one of the biggest communication tools that we have in our everyday life that we don't use formatting in. And it's probably one of the most important ones because you are communicating with a huge audience. A lot of times you're communicating with families and you might not know that they have a disability or that they use a screen reader. So not making your emails accessible, not making your communication accessible is a disservice. So a good way to know, you can't change everything, but a good way to know that you can change something if you see a formatting toolbar, if you see the option to create something other than normal text, to change the style of your text, if you see the option to create a bulleted list rather than just using your space and your dots and stars on your keyboard, use the ones built into whichever program you're using. If you're sharing a video from a third party and there is the option to turn on closed captioning, use their tools. Use it and do it if you can. Any other clues, Kayla?
No, I think that's it.
All right, good.
So using captions for videos is best practice. They're not only helpful to students that are deaf or hard of hearing, but they're also helpful to non-native English speakers. I know I use them all the time when I'm watching TV. I just like to make sure I haven't missed anything. I know a lot of kids have asked, how can I mute the teacher but still pay attention? So captions are definitely best practice and everyone should be using them. So Katie Collins at North has created some tutorial videos for us. So she has a how to turn on captions in Zoom settings. And then there's a how to turn on captions in the Zoom meeting for asynchronous presentations. So I have in the past often recommended that teachers use the presentation mode in Google Slides as they're speaking because there is an automatic captioning built in there. But then if you've created videos that you love and you have already, you can always just add them to YouTube. If you load them to your YouTube channel, YouTube will automatically caption videos for you. So those are some easy ways to turn on captioning.
And Kayla, I bet you a lot of listeners right now are thinking, well, I don't have a YouTube channel. I'm not a YouTuber, but you do have a YouTube channel. Everybody that has a Google account, which is all of us, because we use it everywhere in our teaching and our communication in school, has a YouTube channel. So you are a YouTuber. And as I mentioned before at the bottom, third-party sites. You can't do anything about third-party sites that aren't captioned. Just keep an eye out for the option. And if the option is there, turn it on. That's the most we can ask of you.
Yep. So we have some quick links on this page to show you some tips about how to make text accessible. So the first one is a quick reference guide.
And that's more of just an outline, a concise outline of what we've already talked about.
Then making Google Docs accessible, where we highlight the structure of the document. We talk about how to make tables accessible, how to do the alt text. So again, it's just a review of what we've done. And then we also have one for how to make Word docs accessible.
So this is what Kayla's referring to. It's like a quick start. It's just a couple of key highlights to things to think about when you're creating text documents.
Yep. And then, so I wanted to show you for the last link, it says how to convert an inaccessible PDF to an accessible PDF. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is a document that I received in February, maybe of last year or this year from Health and Wellness. And as you can see, it's not accessible. I can't highlight each sentence. So what that means is someone with a screen reader or someone who's using text to speech can't listen to the text. So obviously there's tons of ways to make things accessible and to convert. So if I use Kami, all teachers can use this tool. You're going to want to go to kamiapp.com, sign in, and then you can actually load this document here. And again, I have a video of this example on that slide. But what it does is it converts this to an accessible document. So you can see that I can highlight it.
6th grade health and wellness.
And Kami will automatically be able to read that now. So it will read anything that you can select. So now this is more accessible than it was in its previous format.
So Kami took this basically picture of all this text and made it text so that a screen reader could read it.
Yep, it's done a lot of the work for you.
That's pretty magical. I'm not gonna lie.
And then one more tool that students can use and teachers can use to listen to text is called Read and Write for Google. So we'll make this a little bit bigger. What Read and Write for Google does is it takes selectable text and it will read that out loud for you. So again, it's up here in the toolbar. You can press play to listen. There's gonna be some lag time.
Text-to-speech, TTS, is a form of speech synthesis that converts text into spoken voice output.
So this can be used on websites, on Google Docs, anything where you can select the text. Read and Write for Google will read it out loud for you. Right.
So Kayla, can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have that on my toolbar.
So you can just add that in the NPS self-service section on the Chrome Web Store. So any teacher can add this and they can have the full premium version for free. And then all students can add it and they'll have that text-to-speech part for free as well. So you just go to you're going to show us.
I think I need to try.
I just Google Chrome Web Store.
Oh, okay. So if I go to the Chrome Web Store.
And you're signed in with your Newton account, there is a self-service section. So these are all pre-approved apps and extensions. So Kami there and Read and Write for Google.
Okay, so I see that I'm signed in because right here is my Newton email. And this is my app self-service.
Yep. And so Read and Write is that purple one with the puzzle piece.
Okay.
And then you just press add to Chrome. So you have to allow the extension to be added. And then I usually open up another Word doc and then press refresh. And then it finishes installing.
Can I open up my Google Doc here?
So now press refresh. And then there's a little purple puzzle piece in your toolbar now, hopefully. I can't see it, it's too tiny.
I see it.
So now press that little drop-down menu and you'll have to finish installing it. So it's not a screen reader, it's just text to speech.
Okay.
So if you wanted to do a screen reader, you would use the built-in Mac voiceover, but for most people, the text to speech is all they need. I just wanted to reiterate that for teachers, if you have a scanned document and you can't select the text, it's not accessible and you can't use that document. So you have to figure out a way to make things accessible before you give them to students. And again, there are people that you can reach out to support you with this, but just make sure that what you're sending to students is accessible.
So this makes me think of a few things like scanning or taking a picture of a textbook page or a couple of pages from a textbook. That wouldn't be accessible.
Yep, but there are ways to convert them. So there's different apps that you can use. There's Kami that you can use. So there are ways to make things readable.
So I know it's a lot of information we just spent, we talked about, and really it's just an important topic because of the unique way that you're delivering your curriculum and the way you're running your classroom. It's not something that people knew about. Nobody should feel guilty that they haven't been doing any of this because you don't know what you don't know. And so hopefully there are some things that will stick in your memory when you're creating content moving forward. You can always reach out to your building ITS for support. You can always put a task ticket in and it will go to the correct person to help you figure out how to make something accessible if it's possible. But also just know that as long as you're choosing to try to make it accessible, then I think that's the important thing. To just scan a document and say, well, if so-and-so, if not everybody can read it, it's not my problem. You wouldn't, if you were physically in your classroom and you had 25 students, you wouldn't photocopy 22 worksheets and just say, well, if 3 kids don't get it, they don't get it. You always want to make sure that every user gets the same experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Kayla?
All right.